morning. I want to call together the November 26, 2012 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. Would you please stand with me for our invocation and pledge? Our Father in heaven, Lord, we're so thankful for this day, for the many, many blessings of life. God, we ask that you be with this commission as we conduct the business of Rutherford County. May that business be in the best interest of all citizens. We ask especially this season that you be with our country. We ask that you be with our state, and especially Rutherford County. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Call the roll, Gal.
Rhonda Allen.
Here.
Richie Boland.
Here.
Veronica Buchanan.
Here.
Will Jordan.
Here.
Mike Cush.
Here.
Greg Lynch.
Present.
Pettis Reed. Steve Sandlin. Mike Vaught. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We need to approve the minutes of our October meeting. I'll call on our Vice Chair, Craig Lynch.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve the minutes of October 22nd.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
Yes.
And a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. Thank you. Items deferred or withdrawn. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have one item that will be taken off the agenda today. That'll be the Rachel's Place final plat, Section 2, Phase 3. That plat will be on our December 10th meeting.
Deferred to December 10th. Thank you. Bond plat extensions, Heatherwood Section 2, bond extension for 1 year.
Mr. Chairman, Heatherwood is just kind of the same situation we've looked at in the past with some other ones. They're still building, but just due to the economic times, they're a little slower than expected. Everything else is looking good out there, though.
Thank you, Eric. Any comments?
Motion approved.
Have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for your training at our last session. You did a good job.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. Very timely. Waiver request. Mr. John Kelsey, item 124007 is requesting a waiver from the distance requirements for fire hydrants for subdivision lots for property located at 10500 Spantown Road.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, this property is located along Spantown Road, which extends off of Almaville Road to the west. The existing property, as it currently exists, is about 5 acres in size, and there is an existing house on the property. The applicant's proposing to split the parcel into 2 separate tracts. Although both parcels of this subdivision will have adequate road frontage, there will not be any kind of an access easement required here. The nearest fire hydrant is located over 1,000 feet from the property. Information provided by the Nolensville College Grove Utility District indicates that a fire hydrant could not be supported at this location, and you'll see that there was an email to that effect in there, as well as the proposed subdivision plat that the applicant's proposing. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Is there a representative here?
I'm not sure if there's a representative here for this particular one. I know there's ones for the others, but not for this one.
Any questions or motions?
Doug, I know on the major subdivisions, when we can't provide fire protection, we do require them to be sprinkled, but on something small like this, we allow them to develop without fire protection.
Under the way it's currently written, the subdivision regulations, correct. That's correct.
Okay.
It's just major subdivisions.
Okay.
Do we usually approve these without a representative here? And I think this is pretty straightforward. The water's not
Yeah,
available.
I don't think, I mean, there's nothing that says that someone has to be here for it. I mean, you have deferred them in the past, but with you, this is a fairly straightforward request, so I don't think you're required to do it just because someone's not here.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve in a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item 7B, Mr. Randall Ray, item 124008 is requesting a waiver from the distance requirements for fire hydrants for subdivision lots for property located along Windrow Road. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, this property is located along Windrow Road, just to the west of the intersection of Windrow and Kingwood Lane, excuse me. The property is part of a larger 240-acre tract. The applicant's proposing to subdivide approximately 2.5 acres off the larger tract for a separate lot. The parcel, again, will have adequate road frontage. However, the nearest fire hydrant is located over 1,000 feet from the property. Information provided by CUD indicates that a fire hydrant could not be supported at this location. Again, you'll see that there's an email here from a CUD to that effect. I will also say, just from a historical standpoint, that this is not the first fire hydrant waiver that's been granted for this particular property. A waiver was granted for Tract 2 of this same 240-acre tract back in May of 2010. There is a representative present, Jacob Follis. He's actually before you now, and we can answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? It's just, we're fixing to build a house on my father-in-law's place. And, as he said, it's not, pipe won't supply another hydrant, so just gonna see if we can get it approved without the hydrant.
The other request was also for family member.
Yes, sir. It was my brother-in-law, Scott Ray, yes.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman. A second.
Motion to approve in a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Foss,
y'all.
for being here.
Thank y'all very much.
And 7C, Mr. Lewis Perry, item 124009, is requesting a waiver from the distance requirements for fire hydrants for subdivision lots for property located off of Rhodes Lane.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, this piece of property is located off of Rhodes Lane to the west and to the north of Pleasant View Drive. All the lots in this proposal are acreage tracts, over 5 acres. Lot 2 was originally created by plat in December of 2011. And there is a copy of what the proposal is in your agenda packets. Lot 2 was one of the 3 lots in the second section of the Pleasant View subdivision. There was also a fire hydrant waiver granted for that subdivision, as some of the lots were outside of 1,000 feet to an existing fire hydrant. The current proposal is to add property to Lot 2, and from that new Lot 2 track immediately to the, I'm sorry, let me reread that. The current proposal is to add property to Lot 2 from the track immediately to the east of the property, and to subdivide approximately 5 acres off of the enlarged Lot 2 to create a new Lot 4, which would access Rhodes Lane from a separate access easement. However, this new Lot 4 will not be within 1,000 feet of an existing fire hydrant and would require a waiver request to that effect. Information provided again by CUD does indicate that a fire hydrant could not be supported at this location. Again, the copy of the plat that they're proposing is included in your agenda packets. There is a representative here to answer any questions, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time as well.
So if I understand this right, they're basically adding some from one track to another track and changing, are they actually yielding any more lots than they have now?
They will have an extra lot. That new Lot 4 will be a new lot, but you basically have it right, at what they're doing. Yes, sir.
They're swapping some property back and forth.
Right.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item 8, submitted for final plat approval. A, Cascade Falls, Section 3, Phase 1C, item 12-2036, 42 lots on 22.1 acres zoned R15, located off J.D. Todd Road, Michael A. Hollingshead developer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, this is the Cascade Falls subdivision. This is a continuation of the existing Cascade Falls that has been approved. I will say that the plat appears to be in conformance with the preliminary plat. One of the biggest comments that we had on this, which has been addressed, is this subdivision was actually approved with the requirement that sprinkler systems be added in the residential homes. Originally, the subdivision didn't have that note on here, but it does now. So with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I don't, Mr. Hill, if you had any comments on this. Okay.
All right, I'm, excuse me, I'm confused. All we're doing is acknowledging the fact that notes have been added to this, to provide the sprinkler system?
Right. I mean, of course, then, if you feel that it's appropriate, then a motion to approve. That was the biggest comment we had. There were a few other minor comments that we had that they've all been addressed. That was the most significant of all.
So 18's gonna stay in there?
I'm sorry?
In the notes here on the plat, 18 with the fire hydrants and everything, because it's all going sprinkled now?
Yes, and actually that was one of the apparently they do have they are showing some fire hydrants out here, but when the subdivision was originally approved, it was approved with the sprinkler system requirement. So, I mean, because there's nothing that says they can't have
18
both.
shouldn't even be there then?
Well, no, they're still gonna have the fire hydrants there.
They still will have some?
Yes, from the comments we received back from the design engineer. Are they, I'm not sure if someone's present from SEC. No, they're not. But, I mean, we're comfortable being that it's there. We actually brought that up as one of our comments, but they're still showing the fire hydrants out there, so.
So these are low-pressure hydrants then? I mean, what CUD say about that? I mean, what?
I mean,
It's been
we have-
several years since this was approved. They may have improved capacity out there.
I was just looking it up to see where that was.
Okay.
But either way, they're gonna have sprinklers out there.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, either way,
So they'll have both, or they'll have either?
both.
Okay.
And it does match the preliminary
Yes, sir.
plat. Everything's.
It does.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second. Any other discussion?
I was just a little bit confused on that. I mean, why do we have both? I mean, I like both. We're not requiring both. We're requiring at least one. So it's either all sprinkled or you have hydrants.
Right, I think what had happened when the subdivision was originally approved, the fire flows out in that area weren't enough to handle that.
Yeah.
So that's why the sprinkler system was put in there, requirement was put in there as part of the subdivision. Now, if they've got adequate fire flows since that time, again, there's nothing, if they still want to do sprinklers in all the houses, that's
Sure.
perfectly fine.
I just-
But,
We wouldn't want to put the wrong message out there. We're requiring both,
Both,
you know? I mean,
right,
we're trying to make sure that fire protection is adequate out there, so I
Right.
mean,
Yeah, one or the other.
yeah. But I just want to comment from CUD, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, what,
Jennifer?
Jennifer, some of the fire hydrants will have adequate, maybe on the front end or something, then the back end doesn't, and that's why we're having both in this subdivision, or?
Hello, Jennifer Wood from Consolidated Utility District. I don't know the history on this particular property. I was just trying to look it up on my phone real quick to see what we had back there. My assumption probably is that they're probably just low flow hydrants, or I don't know what the original development showed as far as fire hydrants, but it's possible that we maybe have upgraded some things in the area and we are able to have fire hydrants in there now, and we weren't before. Hence the requirement for the sprinkler system. I can check into it and get back to you if you'd like. I just don't have the history on this particular property. I wasn't involved in it from the very beginning, so.
You take volunteer fire department, you got I mean, they know what low flow hydrants are and stuff, but I mean, can you hook up to it and you're not gonna be able to?
If it's a red top, you can't pump out of it. Yeah. Out of the pumper nozzle, out of the front.
And call me crazy, but what's the use of it being there if we don't?
If they ever do improve
case they-
fire
yeah.
Then it's
flow out
already
there,
there
then,
to
then
a-
it would become another color top fire
Okay.
hydrant, I would
Yes,
think.
sir.
Yeah.
So the pipe and everything is already put in to adequate, and then once they get there, then you've got the adequate flow that you.
We do. We have several red top hydrants, and they're able to pump out of the side to side, a pumper nozzle out of the
I'm
front.
understanding now, okay.
So the developer
Okay.
pays for that up front.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Fire chief, want to
Thank
tell us, I think?
My recollection of that Cascade Falls, I served on a committee with Mr. Demasi where he talked about requiring sprinklers for structures or homes that didn't have adequate water supply. And if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner, you was on that committee too.
No, I wasn't on the committee. I remember going out there for a visit.
Yeah,
I
well,
wasn't on the-
you was out there when we went out to visit. And my recollection, there's no fire hydrants out there whatsoever, but all the buildings are sprinkled. But I mean, they all have 1 inch sprinkling throughout the structure, and each room within 8 foot. But there was no, as far as I remember, there was no fire hydrants whatsoever out there. That was the whole purpose of putting the sprinklers in that subdivision.
Thank you.
The next phase has fire hydrants, and that's just all the better.
Yeah,
You know, if
yeah,
they,
yeah.
you know.
didn't wanna argue that fact, I'm just trying to figure out what the deal was there.
Well, for the file then, I guess all we need is a letter of clarification, whether they do exist, don't exist, if they're red top or
Right, well,
not.
yeah, I mean, they're showing them being installed on this plat,
Yeah,
so
but
if, but
that-
yeah,
that
we could
doesn't
probably get
necessarily
some,
mean they're
right,
there,
right.
so.
I think we have a motion to
I
approve.
think the motion still is good, but we just need to button up the loose details.
We can do that.
It has to match preliminary.
Yeah,
Ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries, thank you. Item 8B, Ridgewood, Section 1, Item 12, 2038, 45 lots on 45 acres on R15 located along Barfield Crescent Road, Jones Construction Company developer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you stated, this property is located on the west side of Barfield Crescent Road, and this is also what was formerly known as the Malibu subdivision. The preliminary plat for this development was considered and approved by the Planning Commission at their July 23rd, 2012 meeting. This plat does conform to the approved preliminary that we saw for this subdivision. We did have a number of comments that we sent to the design engineer. They were all fairly straightforward. I would classify them as housekeeping in nature for the most part. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Hill, if you had any comments on
This, if you remember on this development, there were some off-site improvements that had to take place, and they had to do a box culvert under Barfield Crescent Road and then under Webb Road also. And the developer has installed both of those, and they seem to be in good working order. All the drainage in this first section is also installed, and they're currently working on the roads out there. And so far, everything looks real good.
Drainage in that whole area, that was the biggest problem of everything. Wasn't it?
Yes, sir. They've brought a lot of fill in. It's a different looking site now.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve,
second.
and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 8C has been deferred until December the 10th. Item 8D, Muirwood, Section 2, Phase 2, Item 12, 2042, 38 lots on 10 1/4 acres zoned R15 with a conditional use permit for planned residential development located off Rucker Lane, Tennessee Contractors Incorporated developer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This property is located on the east side of Rucker Lane. This section is an extension of the existing subdivision of Muirwood and does appear to conform to the approved preliminary plat that was considered by the Planning Commission at their, August 22nd, 2011 meeting. Since this property is served by sanitary sewer by the city of Murfreesboro, it would also require approval by the Murfreesboro Planning Commission as well. Again, we had a few comments on this. The design engineer has addressed those. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Mr. Hill, do you have any comments on this? And Mr. Robert Lewis from the city is also present if you have any questions from the city's perspective.
Robert, any comments? Okay. Questions?
So they will have sidewalks, and it will be the owners to have to put those in section at a time through.
It was just, right.
Yeah. That's a Murfreesboro requirement, right?
I think it was part of their overall plan development. It wasn't necessarily a city requirement at that point. But they'll have to abide by whatever conditions are within the planned residential development that was approved for it.
So every individual lot owner puts their own sidewalks in, is that, I'd step out and take a phone call.
Well, a lot of the times what will happen is you won't see the sidewalks being installed until a certain amount of lots have already been developed, just because you don't want the trucks run on them and everything. I mean, this is within that area that was, that's under litigation, about the annexation that
So
this particular
the
property
city will
created.
take care of all that.
So eventually, at some point, I feel this will probably be annexed into the city. When that'll happen, I don't know, but,
It sounds a little problematic, like everybody put their own sidewalk in, different concrete guys, different, they could end up being wider and narrower, and some people do a better job with concrete than others and everything else, so it could be problematic, but we'll let the city take care of that as far as I'm concerned.
Other questions?
Motion to approve,
We have a motion to approve
subject to all staff comment.
Second.
and a second. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. Item 9, staff reports and other business. Doug, any update on our December 10th meeting?
Just a real brief update for that. After speaking with staff, of course, well, I guess even before that, leading up to that, you're all probably aware that the zoning ordinance was passed at the last Board of Commissioners meeting, so we will have a new zoning ordinance come the first of the year. Because of that, we won't be taking any more zoning applications, as we discussed at our last meeting, in order to allow the existing applications to run through the process, but not to get any new ones into the system until after the new year. So there's really no point in having a night meeting. We had talked about, for December the 10th, we had talked about the possibility of making the December 10th meeting a 9 a.m. meeting and then do some sort of a brunch. The logistics of that might be a little problematic as far as what food to bring. So the suggestion was made, maybe make it a 10 o'clock meeting and then just do our lunch at 11:30 up, like we normally do. And then we could still have use of the room down here. By that point, everything should be cleared out and everything. So if you're all amenable to that, we'll go ahead and do our advertisement for a 10 o'clock meeting on the December 10th, and then just have a lunch following, probably at 11:30.
Comments?
I think it's a good idea, but do give us notice,
Yes, sir, we will do that.
because we'll be here at 9.
Right.
Or 6.
Yeah.
Or 6.
You'll be alone at 6.
Yes, we'll definitely send a reminder of that. So.
Let's go ahead and then change your calendar then to a 10 a.m. meeting on December the 10th, with a lunch to follow.
And I
Yes,
guess
sir.
there's gonna be a sign-up sheet for who's bringing what.
Yes, and I think Ms. Johnson-Nays will take care of that.
I'll send out an email to each of you.
Thank you. Any other reports, comments?
No,
Staff?
sir, I don't have any other comments.
Do we have anything major coming up the 10th? And I mean, not saying anything, but major, because we're changing the time to 10 o'clock. We want to make sure the public knows it's a 10 o'clock meeting.
Right, we'll make sure the public knows that. I mean, there's no zoning
We're
applications.
not changing it for any application. That's why I said I don't know.
Right,
if
no,
the
we're not
applicant's
changing it because of an application.
Okay.
No, no, sir, no.
Doug, when will we begin to dig into the new subdivision regulations and the other documents that need to follow the comprehensive plan?
That would probably be after the first of the year. We've been working on that, and we got, when we were looking through the draft, there were some more changes in there than we thought originally. So we wanted to give you a comprehensive document before we went forward with that. But at this point, it'll probably be after the first of the year is kind of what we're looking at this point.
And you're going to continue to format it in such a way that we can highlight the changes?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the same way we did
I
with
know
the
we'll
zoning.
see- Yes, we'll see
Yes, sir.
what's changed.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know if I got to say it in the full commission though or not, but thank y'all for all y'all's work and help on that. I think Jeff stated that kind of like a general for all of us, but I know a lot of hard work went into that for
No,
staff and yourself. And
I appreciate that, and I want to thank all of you for just the guidance you gave us during that whole time. It was truly a team effort to get everything done.
and only one spoke, and they spoke for it,
Yes, sir.
for a group.
Mhm.
So that was awesome.
Doug, will there be a new final?
Yes, we'll
Published.
get you all new copies of that. Yes, sir.
That really concludes our business. The other item will be a fire protection, I believe it's a fire protection training session that
Yes, sir.
starts. So anyone that
Yeah, we're-
wishes to leave now would be a good time to do that, or you're welcome to stay for our training session.
Yes, and we're very happy today to have Mr. Larry Farley from Rutherford County, and also he has with him Mr. Ken Honeycutt from the city of Murfreesboro, and I'm sure they have a very good presentation for us today.
You had fire training on the agenda. I don't know how much fire training y'all.
We may need to do something.
Sure. Can you follow directions?
Do you have an idea how long we're gonna spend on fire protection?
Not very long.
Not very long.
You gotta get 3 hours training, Larry. you
If this is
understand
2
that?
hours worth, then I'm gonna have to watch the video or something, 'cause I can't do that.
I'm passing out some handouts. When Ken asked me to come by, he wanted I guess the firesides
One back.
opinion on these I would assume subdivisions, but just our thoughts on fire protection out in the county. Of course, you realize the biggest issue we have in rural fire protection is water.
Veronica doesn't know how to take
And it's, of course, I know it's not y'all's fault, but it's disheartening when I see a firefighter come up here and ask to build a property and ask for a waiver to do away with a fire hydrant. But I also realize the infrastructure that can't support it. I have met with CUD, the director. We have discussed about putting in storage tanks out around the Fossville area, the Midland area, where there was a lot of discussion through the commission about lack of water supply. One of the suggestions that they came up with was building storage tanks where they drain off their lines to keep these storage tanks full, that they would keep the tanks full. But in order to have these storage tanks and be able to have a water supply in these areas, it would also, these storage tanks and would be built at county expense. So it was something that they were suggesting, but they wanted the county to pay for. These handouts I've handed out, if you look at, one of them I think I give mine out. The handout is showing fire flow requirements. NFPA 1142 talks about fire water supply in the rural areas. If you look, it says Appendix B at the top of the page, and if you look under the section B105, it says 1 and 2 family dwellings, the minimum fire flow and fire duration requirements for 1 and 2 family dwellings having a fire flow calculation area that does not exceed 3,600 square feet shall be 1,000 gallons per minute for at least 1 hour. Of course, it depends on the size of the structure as what the fire flow is required, but on an average, most houses in Rutherford County are anywhere from 1,800 to 2,500 square feet. But what I'd like to see put in the requirements when you start developing subdivisions, I think the requirement now is a fire hydrant every 1,000 feet. I'd like to see them every 500 feet, because ISO will give you the fire departments a better, higher rating, a better credit, because of more fire hydrants, the closer they are, the more water supply you have, and it increases your fire flow. Because my department and several departments carry the what we call LDH, which is large diameter hose. It's a 5-inch hose. Most of the rural fire departments have just a 3-inch hose. And we had a fire on Orchard Park Drive, which is off Barfield Road, last year. It was 7 degrees outside, and we laid out 1,400 foot of LDH, large diameter hose. That's a long lay. And because of we lost the structure, the neighborhood got together, put a fire hydrant in, which is within 500 feet of that structure, that home now that burnt. But you don't realize the stress it puts on us and the danger it puts the firefighter in when you have a lack of water supply. When we have water readily available, especially in these subdivisions, and we can lay out within 500 feet, that gives us more than adequate water supply to fight the fire for multiple apparatus. And it's just one, ISO, when you talk about ISO and your insurance rating, that's 40% of your ISO rating is the water supply that you have. So you take any rural area that doesn't have a good water supply, their ISO rating is not going to drop very much. Of course, that's another discussion for another day with CUD. That's why the stress for the water tanks that I requested through the commission. But also, in the other handout I hand out is 1142. It says water supplies for suburban and rural firefighting. If you'll see, it shows Chapter 7, water supply. One of the handouts I had is really the calculations for the fire flow requirements for buildings, Appendix B. All that is just showing your calculations for the size of the structure. There's been some discussion through the public safety about adopting an international fire code. If the county ever did that, that would give you guys a lot more latitude of what you can require as far as the protection of what we require for fire. But anyway, on this document right here, it says if you look under Chapter 7, down under This is NFPA 1142, under section 7.5, access to water sources. And under number 1, it says roadways shall have a minimum clear width of 12 foot for each lane of travel. That's to allow adequate space for a fire truck to travel down that street. Turns shall be constructed with a minimum radius of 100 feet to the center line. The maximum sustainable grade shall not exceed 8%. All cuts and field slopes shall be stable for soil involved, bridges, covers. But number 8 says where turnarounds are utilized during fire operations, they shall be designed with a diameter of 120 foot or larger as required to accommodate the equipment of responding fire department. Like in a cul-de-sac, there needs to be enough room in that cul-de-sac where a fire apparatus can go in there and turn around without having to go up there, pull in, back up, pull up, back up, and get out of there. So that's one of the main things I like to see with these subdivisions is a fire hydrant, which that would be on the developer. I understand that. 500 feet for every fire hydrant within that structure, every structure in that subdivision. Make sure the streets are at least 12 foot wide and have enough adequate turnaround in a cul-de-sac where these fire apparatus can maneuver.
Larry, I got a question for Doug. Is it now fire hydrant every 1,000 feet, or every structure must be within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant?
It's the way it's not actually written by structure, it's by property.
Per property.
Right, so it's
So a
1,000
fire
feet by
hydrant could literally be
property.
nearly 2,000 feet apart.
Say that again?
You know, if a house is here within 1,000 feet one way or the other, the fire hydrants are a lot farther apart than 1,000 feet right now.
If you're
Because
trying to do the measurement
you
from
can
the
do
lot.
measurement
Yes,
from
sir.
either way. So,
Right.
you're saying every 1,000 feet. They're not. They're
Yeah, well,
every
that's
2,000
spoke,
feet,
yeah.
basically. Yeah.
I mean, that what I was thinking was that's ISO's requirements,
Yeah.
that the house has to be within 1,000 feet, so I misspoke.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the fire hydrants are every 2,000 feet. Well, that's nearly half a mile. That's
Yeah.
pretty far apart.
And a lot of them in the subdivisions, they say, well, the house is within 1,000 foot of that hydrant. But if you go across back to two people's backyards,
Yeah.
and of course, a lot of people have fences, and you can't drive a fire apparatus through somebody's driveway through the backyard to lay out a fire hose. It has to be by the road, where the road lays. So 1,400 feet, and we had adequate water supply once we got established. But you can imagine the workload in laying out 1,400 foot of a large diameter hose to get water supply. The large diameter hose we lay out cuts down on the friction loss of that water going through that line. So it gives us, once we do get established water supply through a hydrant, it gives us adequate water supply. But it would be a great advantage to the rural fire service in these subdivisions. And as you guys know and sit here and plan with all these development, that Rutherford County is not a rural county anymore. We're more suburban, and there's houses going up everywhere, and there's large subdivisions, and there's homes. There's a lot of $1 million homes out here. I mean, large 4, 5, 6,000 square foot homes. And in a lot of areas they're setting out where there's no water protection whatsoever. And we can only do so much. And if we don't have adequate water supply, that's our number one agent that we use to fight fire with. We're pretty much, our hands are tied.
Larry, I have a question about maintenance on these hydrants. Once the hydrant goes in, it's up to CUD to maintain it. Is that right?
Yes, but what we do is we flow those hydrants. We try to flow them at least twice a year. So my guys go out and they check the hydrant, make sure the caps are loose where they can get into them, make sure everything's in working order, clear all weeds and debris around it so it's easily identified, and we try to help maintain those. But ultimately, they belong to CUD, and it's their responsibility to go out and flow them. But one of the things that we do, and a lot of things have been brought up about the Midland area where there's not enough water supply, and then the discussion was about potable water, where the water sits for a long time, where you have large lines.
Yeah, that was going to be my question,
and
is
that
about
water,
flushing them. Yeah.
And that water's not adequate to drink. But one of the things we do by flowing those hydrants twice a year is the more you flow those hydrants, the more you clean those lines out, and the better the water, better quality water you have. So actually, we're doing the citizens of Rutherford County a service by flushing those hydrants or flowing those hydrants and pressure testing those hydrants twice a year.
On the volume of water that you have to flush an individual hydrant, would it change if they were 500 feet apart versus 1,000 feet apart? I mean, here's kind of my thinking is, you're wasting a lot of water too when you're having to flush those. I mean, I know it's part of a maintenance issue, but we're talking about our water's becoming more and more limited in supply. So I'm just trying to understand, if I've got to flush a line that's 1,000 and they're 1,000 feet apart, am I using the same amount of water as I would if they're 500 feet apart? Because you got to flush the whole line.
Yeah, I mean, well, basically what we do, there are times when CUD will go out and they'll open up a hydrant and they'll call me and say, hey, we're flushing this line out. If your guys come by, don't bother. And they may flow that hydrant all day long, or 4 or 5 hours. We go out most time and turn the hydrant all the way open, and for a few minutes let it run, and then close it back down, check the connections, make sure they're loose. Because we had a fire out in Leanna one day, and I went to lay out to a hydrant, and I actually put a hydrant wrench on the Storks connection, the big, and I weigh 250 pounds. I jumped up and down on this thing, and I could not budge it. It was welded shut. So I told Walter Hill to notify CUD that we need to get this open, because I mean, we had a fire hydrant right there, and we couldn't hook to the 5-inch connection. We had to hook 2 3.5-inch connections to the side connections, because that thing was, I don't have, whoever put it on there, just it felt like it'd been welded shut. So it might as well not even been there. So that's another reason why we go out and check these hydrants, make sure that they are in working order. If they're leaking, we notify CUD that we have a leak. But everything we do, we have to report this to CUD of how much water we flow during training, during fire, whatever we're flowing water for. And
How do you calculate that? Like, once you get the water going and you're flushing a system, how do you calculate how much you've used? Like, do you time it because you know it's going to go to a certain pressure?
We don't know how much pressure it is. We just time it.
Okay.
But most time, we're just open the hydrant all the way up, which cleans the hydrant out. Open it all the way up and let it run for a minute and shut it back down. Where a CUD may flow a hydrant for 4 or 5 hours just wide open because they're having a lot of debris. We had a fire out on Hallsville Pike, the Five Peppers Farm, a big, large structure. Las Casas had we flowed a lot of water up a hydrant, but there was so much debris in those lines that it actually tore a pump up in their tanker truck because there was so much gravel and sand and residue that it's going to cost Las Casas probably about $7,000 to replace that pump. So that's another good reason why I emphasize these departments get out and flow your hydrants, because if CUD has a break and they go out and they do a repair, of course there's going to be dirt and debris getting these lines. That's just the nature of the beast. But if they flow these hydrants and clean them out, then that alleviates a lot of the problems they will have with their apparatus.
Larry, I've noticed a lot of the little red boxes. What are those being put on the hydrants?
Little red boxes?
I've got one on mine.
They're flushers.
Oh, okay. I've seen several on our street, and I didn't.
Automatic flushers.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, we basically go out and flow them and check them and make sure they're at, because there are times when you will go out and one may be leaking and there's a shut off and down in the ground, and they just cut those hydrants off.
Oh, okay.
So if a fire department responds to a fire, they go to hook the hydrant, turn it on, there's no water, it's shut off down the ground, and we need to know about that. Because if the hydrant's not operating properly, we want to make sure that CUDs are notified where they can do whatever they need to do to fix it or repair it.
20 degrees.
Ken Honeycutt, I brought Assistant Chief Honeycutt with me. He's been a big asset to me as being only one department person paid in the county as a fire service. And Ken, his forte is codes. He's a city codes enforcer, and so if you have any questions about codes or fire code, I brought him here to answer that, because we haven't, as a county, we haven't got in that part of the side of fire protection as far as fire codes and stuff. But I brought him in case y'all had any questions that I couldn't answer, basically.
What you brought up, Larry, what's our cul-de-sac? He said we need 120 feet diameter. What is our regulation now?
We're 100 feet.
We're 100 feet?
Yes, sir.
So you're saying that we need to increase that to 120 feet?
That's correct, right?
No, I think 100 feet's adequate.
Is it?
Yep, I think ours is 96.
So you think 100 is adequate?
Yes.
And we have 100?
Yes, sir.
Okay, 12-foot roads, we all right with that?
It's 12-foot lanes is what it says.
Lanes, per lane.
Per lane.
24-foot
Per
roads.
lane.
Yeah, we don't have
Is that
that.
what
A lot of
do
these
we
county
have?
roads aren't.
have-
I think our subdivision roads are, but these county
I
roads
think even our
aren't.
subdivision roads, our typical cross-section we see, and that's 11-foot lane as opposed to a 12-foot.
We defined a substandard road as less than 18 feet, so we knew we had.
Right. So that'd be 9-foot lanes if you
Yeah.
cut them in half.
Okay, we need to look at that.
And something that Fire Marshal Honeycutt brought up too was landscaping. You know, having landscaping stuff designed where you can't get it, it interferes with apparatus getting to the structure. You want to expand on that, what we talked about?
Yeah, I think what he's talking about, when it, not just landscaping around the building, what he's referring to is if you have a development where you have an island that runs down, that splits the lanes, you have to be careful with those widths. I have seen some that are like 10 or 11 feet, and it makes it difficult. You obviously can't pass one another, you know, and then you got to have certain cut-throughs at distances where fire hydrant, or where fire apparatus can get out and turn around. You have to stagger your fire hydrants on each side of the road. We've been talking mostly today about residential, and he was talking about 1,000-foot as far as the hydrant spacing. You know, there's a lot of things you can compromise with if you sprinkle these houses. Okay, you can increase the distance of your hydrants. You can lower the widths of the streets. There's a lot of things developers can save on. You can even lower the fire main size, you know, depending on what's in the area. So there's some compromise there if you sprinkle these houses. We have talked about single family. These sprinkler systems that go in single family house are strictly for life safety. It's not for property preservation. I don't want you to misunderstand that. Okay? That's for life safety. Now, I don't believe I've ever seen a sprinkler building burn down or a house. They are for life safety in single family, but they also do protect the structure in most cases. Now, if you have something like a lightning strike, different story, you know, because there's not sprinklers in the attics and usually not in the garages. They're just for life safety to get the people out. But you still have to figure fire flows. It's kind of like I know we were talking about 500 gallons. When you sprinkle a house, you get a 50% reduction in the required fire flow if you sprinkle houses. You know, that could get down, if it's 1,000 gallons and you get down to 500, you still got an issue with the 500. As far as commercial, let me just tell you how we go through our process in the city. We do have, the water department has an ordinance that they passed back in 1989 that all of our fire hydrants in residential subdivisions are 500 foot apart. That's been on the books for a while. A little bit different when you get into commercial ventures. When you start looking at that, and here's the process that we go through. Before any plans go to the Planning Commission, we review those with CUD and Murfreesboro Water. What we try to do there is figure out what the fire flow requirements are for that particular building. And how we do that is you got to have three things. You need to know the ground floor area of the building, the number of stories, and the type construction. Once you know that, you can go by the chart, either the ISO chart or the chart in the International Fire Code. Now, they're relatively similar. There's not a whole lot of difference in the required fire flow in either one of those. So either one of those would work. Once we do that, we know what that fire flow is. We know, you know, if this building is fully sprinkled, you know, it gets a 50% reduction in that fire flow. If it's required 3,000, then that would be 1,500. And what ISO requirements, and the fire code is basically the same. If you've got a fire hydrant within 300 foot of the building, ISO will give you a 1,000 gallon a minute credit. Okay? If you've got two, then you've already met your 1,500 gallons a minute required fire flow. Does that make sense? I know I'm throwing out a lot of stuff here. We also talk about the access to these buildings, and one of the things he's talking about landscaping. You know, you see large buildings come in where they've got big trees along the roadway around the access. You know, people sometimes don't think 20, 30 years down the road when those trees get 40 foot. And if you've got an aerial device, it gets very difficult to get to that building, either for rescue or firefighting purposes. One of the things, and we've worked with CUD and our planning department and Murfreesboro Water Department, Consolidated is going to a lot of private water systems. when you get into private water systems, you know, you've got issues with who's gonna put the fire line in the ground, who's gonna maintain it if something happens, who's gonna maintain the hydrants, there's a lot of issues with private because.
What does that mean? Private
That
water
means,
systems?
Consolidated brings their water line up to the property line, and then it's the developer's responsibility, and Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong, the developer is responsible from that point to get what we require in that development. So you gotta have somebody that knows what they're doing with their installation as far as NFPA standards, who's gonna maintain it. All of that is in a document that we all come up with and agreed to, that the developer has to assure us that that's been installed properly, it's maintained properly, we have access to the property to go in and flow hydrants, things like that. So it's about a 3-page document that has to be notarized, and it has to be recorded. Do you have another question? Okay. I think I've answered, I hope that, I think once you, if you really get into this somewhere down the road, I think it takes a little bit longer than 20 or 30 minutes to discuss this because there's a lot of options. I think it's well worth your time to do that because I know this county is growing. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at.
Larry, you and I discussed this, putting tanks in the areas where we've got red top fire hydrants to be able for a tanker to come in, fill up, get the water, and go back to the fire scene. Did you ever come up with what gallons we need in a tank and what the price is on those?
Well, you just, no, I didn't. I'll be honest with you, with the holidays, I haven't had time to look at that. But it's going to, in order to fight a structure fire out in those areas and fossil places where you have where the red top hydrants is just pretty much gone black, you'd have to have, there's a lot of times we float anywhere from 10 to 20,000 gallons of water on a structure fire if it's fully involved. And of course, if you don't establish a very quick water supply on a structure fire and keep that water flowing, then it's going to get away from you, and it's going to go through the roof, and then it's going to take a lot of water.
You probably had time also to pinpoint areas, how many we may be looking at, how many of those tanks.
Well, I know, I know for a fact that Mike Lee with CD contacted me and pretty much told me that these hydrants are pretty much off the grid. They're still there. They've even considered even taking them out of the ground because they were red top, which is 500 gallons or better a minute, to where they wouldn't even flow. And basically, we never even tried to hook the hydrant to pump. All we use a hydrant for is to fill up the trucks. Unless we are able to get close enough to that structure, we can lay a fire hose from that hydrant to the truck to give us enough water flow where we can have continuous water supply. But in a red top hydrant, that's most time unless we're right on top of it, we won't even hook to a red top hydrant. We'll just use it to fill our trucks up and transport water back and forth.
Y'all still doing the pool, like?
The drop tank.
Drop tank stuff, yeah. Well, we just had 3 today on these waiver requests, and I've never had a good feeling about, giving those waivers. I don't think any of us have, but they've mainly been for a family member on a farm, building their own separate house and something, and water's right down the road. I mean, we're never going to do a subdivision this way. I want to make it clear, we're not doing subdivisions this way, but water supply is getting tougher and tougher. I appreciate y'all giving us this, and we got to make sure that we're building homes or allowing homes to be built, in a safe environment where the fires, in case of fire, are going to be protected.
And there's just houses and subdivisions popping up everywhere in this county. There's a lot of fields I hauled hay in as a teenager they're loaded with houses now, and so you don't have that. It's just a lot of growth going on, and and you see all these houses going up, and you have a structure fire, and there's nothing you can do but you just have to set up, and we're in a volunteer system too, so it's not like when we have a fire in the daytime, we know how many people's coming, and if you have to shuttle water, then you have to you got to have somebody in charge to oversee everything. You got to have at least 2 firefighters in the structure. If you got 2 in there, you need 2 outside waiting on them, 2 in, 2 out. Yeah. That's OSHA requirements. Then you got to have somebody to drive the trucks. You got to have somebody to set up that water supply, to establish that water supply, and then you got to have people driving the trucks back and forth to the hydrants to fill those tanks up. So it gets into a manpower issue too, where if you have the more hydrants you have, the less manpower you actually have to have on that scene in order to strategically fight that fire, if that makes sense. Because you got so many people. If you got 20 people, half of them's tied up in just trying to establish a water supply, and it's one of the most sickening feelings I have as a firefighter when we have a structure fire, and there's times we go in, we get there, we knock it down, and it's contained in one room, but then you have one where they go through the roof and you completely lost everything, and a lot of it's because of water supply. You don't have the tool that we need in order to extinguish that fire. Now he made a comment about fire extinguishers. I mean about sprinklers. And one of the things that people misunderstand is that when a fire sprinkler goes off, it's not like in the movies. They don't all go off. It's got a fusible link in that sprinkler. The temperature has to get to a certain temperature where it melts that tube, or it kicks that tube out and releases that water. So in other words, the fire would have to be multiple fires in that house before that sprinkler would go off. So like these right here. If it was a fire right here, only that one sprinkler would go off, not every one of them in the room. And I can promise you this. He said it's life safety. It is. But and I've seen a lot of fires and seen people rebuild. Water damage is a whole lot easier to repair than fire damage. It's a whole lot easier to tear out, because mostly what your damage is going to be is the floor. It's easy to tear a floor up, tear the subfloor up, put new joists down. But when it goes through the roof and it burns, it's a lot more extensive damage with the fire than it is water. But I wanted to make sure we did share that, because everybody has a misconception that when wind sprinkler goes off, they all go off, and that's just not true. But anyway, any of these things that you would consider to do to help our job be easier, it would greatly be appreciated.
Thanks.
We visited that sprinkle idea once, had a meeting on it, and then we elected not to do anything.
Well, I know I would rather see when you waiver a fire hydrant to require them to sprinkle that house. It's about $1 per square foot. It's very inexpensive when you look at the overall cost of a structure. But on that Five Peppers farm out there off Halsey Pike, they had a big, large barn burnt. This gentleman is building a 20,000 square foot home on this property. Fire hydrants down the road. And I asked him, he was just devastated. He just couldn't believe it. This was just a hay barn. And I said, let me ask you something. That big mansion you're building over there, I said, did you sprinkle that? He said, I never thought about it. There is no way a volunteer system where we're set up would ever be able to go in there and actually do anything with that structure. It's 20,000 square foot. And so I highly recommend him that he go to the expense of laying a water line from Halsey Pike to his front yard. And it's probably, a mile or two off the road. But if he can afford to build a house that big, I believe I would afford to lay the water line. And if I'd been me, I'd have sprinkled it. But the thing about it is that people don't have that mindset, because we don't like insurance companies until we need them. We don't think about the fire department until we have a fire. So this man's line of thinking, his whole dynamic has changed on what he sees, and he lost a barn. He lost cedar beams in there he was going to put in his house, $50,000 worth of cedar beams. He lost a brand new tractor and bush hog. I mean, he had all kinds of equipment in this barn that he lost. It was over $1 million loss. And this was a steel frame structure, like you build a church out of. It was a real nice barn. So, what I'd like to see is that we require people for life safety and for firefighter safety, and for, like he said, it's not really for property preservation, but it makes a big difference whether we have one room burn or a whole structure. That when you waiver a hydrant, require them to sprinkle it.
Larry, do you have the figures on a 2,600 square foot house, $2,600 to sprinkle it? How many years does it take to recoup that money on your insurance premium? Do you get any figures on that?
That would probably vary from insurance company to insurance company, but typically I think on a commercial structure it's around 10 to 15 years. Now, but we're talking a whole lot more money. Probably 5 years on a residential.
Regular. Farm
Yes.
Bureau, State Farm type policy.
Yeah, and each insurance company is different about what percentage they give you off for that.
Since
Larry,
we're-
Larry, you brought up something there that I know the piece of property out there, Mr. Peppers is. There was no waiver granted for that house, because the tract of land is within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant. So that's another problem within itself. His house is a mile or more off the road,
Yeah.
so he met the requirement.
I didn't say, I didn't say y'all
know,
did a waiver, but I'm just saying.
That's another problem. Somebody buys a 50, 60, 80, 100 acres or more that may be 2 miles deep, and the house is at the back side of it. They're 2 miles from a fire hydrant and still meet our codes.
Yeah.
So that's a problem within itself.
And
I
it's,
don't
and
know
it's
what
not,
we do about it.
and
but-
it's not that he did anything wrong. He just, people just don't have the mindset.
Yeah.
You know, we all plan for, when we set out our plans, we plan it according to a perfect dynamic. I mean, my daughter can sit here and tell you, I want to buy a new car and I can make the payments and blah, 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 way down the road. I said, well, what about a rainy day? What happens if you lose your job? And we don't think about things like that until it happens, then it's too late. But these people don't have that mindset of fire. And so, I mean, until it happens. Now, his whole dynamic about fire protection has totally changed. I'm sure if he had the opportunity to go back and change it, he'd sprinkle that house. Another thing, I get phone calls every day from insurance companies, and they were kind of lenient about structures within 1,000 foot of a hydrant. If you have an ISO rating of 5, which the county does right now, we're going through an evaluation on the 1st of December. If you have an ISO rating of 5, and it's 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, it's like no fire department. If you're within 1,000 foot of a hydrant, 5 miles that fire station, you get that ISO rating. And now they've gone to where we can tell them it's within 1,000 foot or close. They're actually going out and measuring them. They're map questing these addresses. And if it's 5.1, their ISO rating goes from a 5 to a 10. I mean, you're talking about $500 and $600 or more a year. A lot of insurance companies are not even writing people now. And it's because of all this damage on the East Coast, all these tornadoes and stuff, insurance companies have had a big hit. And I get 10 phone calls a day. And they call me, I look on the maps and give them the ISO rating. And they want the address of the fire station closest to it, and they map question. And it'll tell you whether it's road miles, where it's 5.2. And a lot of these insurance ratings, people call me, man, you got to give me a letter or whatever. They're going through the roof because they can't meet that ISO rating. They're outside of 5 miles, or they don't have a fire hydrant within their location. And their insurance is doubling on these homes. And I mean, I've just this last 2 or 3 months, I've really seen these insurance companies start to really bear down on these people. And I've had several of them say that they won't even write them, won't even rewrite their policy.
I have a question on the residential sprinkler systems. Are you familiar with, I mean, I assume the residential sprinkler system, is it very different than a commercial one?
It's not as complex as a commercial system.
Well, the reason I ask is because I'm just assuming they require some kind of maintenance, and most homeowners are not going to be familiar with what to do once they move into a house that has one. I'm just curious about what that entails.
On a residential, it's all plastic pipe. There's a limited number of heads. Most of the time you'll see them in your living area, your bedrooms, your hallways, kitchens. And I've seen those things work 100 times where one head will put a fire out. And typically, that will be in the kitchen area. Statistics shows us that most fires will start there on the stove in the kitchen. So I've seen that happen a lot of times, but it's all plastic pipe. You do not have to put a fire department connection on it where fire department's got to hook up to it. You don't have to monitor that system. As far as maintenance, there's nothing in the code that requires a sprinkler company to come out and do that. I think if you do that in your house, whoever installs that should educate that homeowner as to what they need to do. There's some little valves there where you can flow those things, kind of like an inspector's test valve, where you can flow that and clean that system out.
And is it water? Is it chemical? I mean, what's coming
It's
out of
just
this?
plain water.
Just water.
Yeah, and it comes off the domestic line, so there's not a separate line you got to put in the ground.
Okay.
You can just tee right off of that domestic water line.
I got a DVD. I'll be glad to give you. It kind of shows you and lays that all out about sprinklers.
was just curious so far as, since this is relatively new for homeowners, I was just curious about what would be involved for them, so.
I mean, that's pretty much it. You know, there's a lot of cities and counties that require sprinklers in single family regardless.
Okay.
Just ordinances that they pass. What you're talking about here is where they do not have adequate fire flow requirements, then you're protecting them.
Why attics are not sprinkled? Is that primarily because they may freeze?
Yes, sir, that's part of the problem, but 80% of all fire deaths occur in a person's own home. We know that for a fact. Unless it's a lightning strike, typically we don't see fires in attics. It's always in the living areas, usually not even in the garages. So it's all right there within their heated space.
Well, and you've both talked about the variances that we give, one are the waivers. The only reason we pretty much all agree to a waiver is the amount of water.
The water line won't support it. I understand that.
And looking down your chart here, the fire flow gallons per minute, how much cost would that add? In other words, in this scenario we're talking about, if you got a house that's a half mile off the road, typically they put in between a 1 inch and a 2 inch line back to it. Is that going to give you enough flow at the house for a sprinkler system? Or do you have to raise that line?
Well, no, usually a 2 inch will take care of that. Jennifer may be able to help us on this. I think a 2 inch is probably about as big as you ever see to a house.
What your elevation difference is from
Yeah.
the road to the house.
Are you talking about for a fire hydrant or for sprinklers?
For sprinkler.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, we get the letters from CUD or, the different water departments stating that we can't, that their line won't support it. But how do we know, or I guess, what's a minimum line that's at the road that would support even a fire suppression, a sprinkler system in the home?
Well, like I say, typically you see, 1.5 to or 2 inch line going to a single family. It depends, like you say, how far it is off the road. Now take into consideration these sprinklers in a single family home. We're looking at average of 18 gallons a minute.
Okay.
So we're not looking at a commercial system. Okay. You're looking at minimal, and I think they're just about to come up with a one-head design. So it's compared to a commercial system where it's going to be much more than that. You're talking maybe 18 gallons a minute. Depends on their pressure. Depends on how far the line is. If it's 2 or 3 miles off the road, they may have to consider, if you get in a situation like that, they can put a 300-gallon tank and a little half-horse motor in there to do that. People do that all the time. They use well water. It don't matter.
That's what I was going to ask you. If the house is primarily serviced by well water, it'll work the same?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Until you lose power.
Yeah.
If the fire's in the well house, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
I didn't realize the conversation was going to get this extensive. I would have brought a DVD showing how simplified the sprinkler system is in a residential structure. But I mean, it takes you about 5-10 minutes to do your little maintenance check every so often, and it walks you through it on this DVD.
Yeah.
And it's but my job and his job, I'd rather go to a house that's got a sprinkler system and cut the water off is to try to fight the fire and send my people in and put their lives in danger trying to save somebody or save their property. But but it's the main thing that I want to convey to y'all today. It's very hard to fight fight fires if we don't have the primary tool that we need, and that's the water. That's paramount. That's the most important thing.
Mr. Bolin, did that answer your
Yes, sir.
your question?
Just in a residential home, 2,600 square foot, one sprinkler in the kitchen, you said 18 gallons? Is that what?
They
Yeah.
put out about 18 gallons a minute, yes, sir, average.
You need one every 8 feet, you say?
Those about 7.5 foot. They you get a 15-foot umbrella typically.
Typical kitchen then would have.
Yeah,
probably
and
have
some of them
15.
are extended coverage heads. I mean, they'll go out 20 foot. So it just depends on what they put in there. How big the room is. It's all calculated on those kind of things. The size of the room.
Now, the residential system, are they flush with the ceiling? Like they don't
They can be.
good like this. I mean, they can be
You won't even see them.
Yeah.
I mean,
They
you can have
actually-
them either way. You can have them like this, or you can have them concealed.
And they have little covers over them. When the fire, the cover drops off and the hydrant, it pops down and it goes off.
And they have to be color coded from the factory. They can't be painted. Okay, so, because that just kind of messes up the system there when you start painting over them.
Yeah.
But they're color coded. They are flush.
But like you say, as you drive through Rutherford County, and since I've gotten in this position, I've seen a lot of Rutherford County, and it's amazing to me the homes, how many homes and how many large homes are out there. And of course, my thinking may be different from y'all's in commission, but there's these people out here deserve the best fire protection we can offer them, and we can't. It's hard for me to do my job without water. And I realize that CUD, I mean, I've had extensive discussions with them about the size lines and everything, about the water being potable and suitable to drink. So I realize there's going to be concerns about that, and that's one of the like I say, one of the reasons about the tanker trucks is that we've got to have water, or there's limited what we can do.
Can we get a copy of that DVD, or is there a?
Yes, I'll be happy. I can get you. I'll get you every one of y'all a copy. I mean, just for your own knowledge, whether you decide to move or not, it give you a lot of information. And I'm a firefighter. It's visual. I'm more visual. I learn better if I can see how it operates. You get a better understanding of it. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Well, I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farley and Mr. Honeycutt. Appreciate you being here. Doug?
I have nothing further.
Yes, I
I
do.
believe when we get into subdivision regulations, we'll be taking an extensive look at fire protection.
Yes, sir.
It'll be part of what we'll be going through over the next few months.
Quick question. The way we are currently, the regs are a major subdivision and I guess a minor subdivision. Tell me again what the definition of a minor subdivision would be.
Well, our current definition is by the number of lots. Anything 4 lots or greater is considered a major subdivision. Anything up to 3 lots is considered a minor. Under our proposed subdivision regulations, what we'll be bringing to you, it's going to depend on the work they're doing. It won't really make any difference the number of lots. If they're dedicating right-of-way, extending utilities, those kind of things, regardless if it's 1 lot or if it's 100, it'll be a major subdivision. Right. If they're just partitioning off land, but they're not extending utilities or dedicating any right-of-way, those will all be minor subdivisions. Again, it won't matter if they're 1 lot or 100. Then there's another category called partitions that are that your smaller resubs and things. But that, generally speaking, that's how the definitions will be.
Doug, I suggest you get the DVD. Let's do it up here as training.
We can certainly do that.
January.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody have anything else?